My granddaughter didn't just offer to help with my sewing business. She quietly changed the contact information on all my client accounts to her own email, then told my oldest customers I was retiring and she was taking over by my blessing. For 60 years, I built my business one stitch at a time. I thought the fabric of my life was strong. I never knew my own granddaughter would try to unravel it all with a single, well-placed lie. The silence came first. The phone, which had chirped steadily for decades, fell mute. My workroom, once a symphony of humming machines and rustling silk, was tomb quiet. I mentioned it to Chloe, my voice frayed with confusion. "Grandma, you should be thanking me," she said, not looking up from her phone. "I'm saving your business. Your eyes are going. These clients need reliability now. They've all agreed to transition to me." "Mrs. Abernathy called me for her daughter's wedding gown," I said, my voice trembling. "She said you told her I'd retired." "I did her a favor," Chloe shrugged, a gesture so casual it felt like a slap. "My designs are more modern anyway. And let's be honest, your patterns are a bit dated. I'm just using them as inspiration." The word inspiration curdled in the air between us. A week later, desperate for thread and human connection, I went to Abe's Fabrics. The bell above the door was a familiar, comforting sound. Mrs. Abe, sharp as a new pair of shears, took one look at my face and knew. "She's stealing from you, Flo," she said, her voice a low, angry whisper after I'd spilled the story. "I've had 3 customers this week asking if it's true you've retired. They were heartbroken." She grabbed her own phone from behind the counter, her movements brisk. "Let's call Sarah Abernathy. Right now." She put it on speakerphone. Sarah's voice, usually so warm, was laced with confusion. "Flo, Chloe said you gave her all your patterns, that you were done. She's selling dresses online at Pop Style Boutique that look exactly like your Petrov original designs, but for a fraction of the price." I thought it was strange. Mrs. Abe hung up and looked at me, her eyes blazing. "She's not just stealing your clients. She's stealing your art. And we are going to stop her." The counterattack began with a thread of truth. Mrs. Abe, my ferocious, fabric-wielding ally, helped me contact Martin Croft, a copyright lawyer whose mother's wedding dress I had made 40 years ago. He was appalled. He sent a cease and desist letter to Pop Style Boutique that was less a request and more a declaration of war. It triggered a lawsuit that named both the company and Chloe for industrial-scale copyright infringement. I played my part. I was the frail, sad grandmother, accepting Chloe's success with a watery smile. Meanwhile, Mrs. Abe and I reached out to my original clients, the women who knew the difference between grosgrain and satin, between a Petrov original and a cheap knockoff. They were horrified, and their outrage was a chorus of support. The lawsuit was a rock thrown into Chloe's pond, and the ripples were panic. She came to my house, her face a mask of fury stripped of its false charm. "Call off your lawyer, Grandma." "Now." "I don't think I will, dear." Her eyes narrowed. "Then I'll tell everyone. I'll tell Uncle David and Aunt Marie. I'll post it all over my social media. That Grandpa didn't die of a heart attack. That he killed himself because he couldn't stand living with you, and you covered it up out of shame. I will destroy the way this family remembers him." The blow was so vile, so perfectly aimed at the most sacred part of my heart, that the world swam. My breath caught. For a moment, I was lost in the terrible, fictional darkness she was spinning. But then I felt Mrs. Abe's steadying presence beside me. She had insisted on being there. "Ask her for proof, Flo," she murmured, her voice an anchor. "Demand the evidence." I straightened my spine, my voice quiet but clear. "How do you know this, Chloe? Where is your proof?" She faltered, her confidence cracking. I found letters. His old journals." "You're a liar," I said, the words cold and final. "Your grandfather died in my arms. In this very house, from a massive coronary. Dr. Evans signed the death certificate. It's in my safe." I turned the tables. I called a family meeting. With Mrs. Abe as my witness, I presented my husband's original death certificate to my children. I told them of Chloe's threat, her willingness to desecrate their father's memory to save her own skin. The fallout was swift and absolute. The betrayal was too profound, the lie too cruel. My son, Chloe's own father, looked at her as if she were a stranger. The family, my beautiful, messy fabric of a family, closed ranks around me and cut her off completely. The victory was settled in court and in the heart. Pop-style boutique, wanting to avoid a public trial, settled for a sum that ensured my comfort for the rest of my life. I used it to hire a bright young assistant from the fashion school, whose keen eyes work alongside my experienced hands. Chloe was left with nothing. No business, no family, no reputation. She thought my failing eyes meant I couldn't see what she was doing. But a lifetime of working with fine thread teaches you to perceive what others miss. The slight pull of a dishonest stitch, the hidden weakness in a seam, the rotten heart beneath a beautiful surface. To anyone being underestimated, your deepest strengths aren't always the most visible. Trust your instincts. They are the truest pattern you will ever follow. The quiet that settled after the storm was different this time. It was a clean, earned silence, filled with the soft whisper of silk and the gentle hum of a new beginning. My workroom was alive again, but the melody had changed. Now it was a duet. My assistant, Maya, was a revelation. She was young, yes, but possessed of an old soul and hands that respected the history in every scrap of fabric. Where Chloe had seen outdated patterns, Maya saw a master's library. She didn't want to replace my work. She wanted to learn from it, her digital fluency perfectly complementing my tactile knowledge. She became my eyes, and I, her guide. But a finished garment always has a few loose threads. A month after the settlement, a thick, creamy envelope arrived, bearing the logo of a prestigious international design council. I almost discarded it as junk mail. It was an invitation to accept a Lifetime Achievement Award for artisanal excellence. Mrs. Abe, who was over for tea, snatched it from my hands. "Flo, this is the big one. The one they give out in Paris." "Someone's playing a joke," I murmured, my mind flashing to Chloe. Another cruel trick. But it was real. Mrs. Abe made the call. One of my former clients, a magazine editor whose wedding gown I'd made decades prior, had secretly nominated me years ago. The recent, very public lawsuit had only highlighted the enduring value and integrity of my work against the backdrop of fast fashion theft. The scandal had, ironically, sewn my name into the modern conversation. The victory felt complete. Yet a single, nagging thread remained. It was Maya who found it. She was helping me digitize my pattern archives for the award submission, a safety measure we both agreed was now necessary, when she let out a small gasp. "Flo, this file is corrupted. The Abernathy Cascade gown." My heart sank. It was one of my most intricate designs. "Is it gone?" "No, not gone. It's been altered. The original digital file has been overwritten with a degraded version. The metadata shows the last save was by Chloe's iPad. She hadn't just stolen. She had vandalized. A final, petty act of sabotage on her way out. It was a small thing in the grand scheme, but it felt like the last, dirty knot in an otherwise cleanly finished piece. I knew then what I had to do. Revenge was behind me. This was about restoration. I sat down at my drafting table, the smooth paper a familiar comfort. My hands, which knew the curves and lines of that gown better than my own face, began to move. I couldn't see the fine details, but my fingers remembered the pressure of the pencil, the sweep of the hip, the delicate cascade of the sleeve. I redrew it. Not from a place of anger, but from memory and love. Maya watched, then scanned my shaky but perfect lines, creating a new, pristine, and legally ironclad digital file. The act of recreating what she tried to destroy was the final stitch in my healing. I had taken her last act of spite and turned it into a testament of my own resilience. The night of the awards ceremony in Paris, I stood on the stage, Mrs. Abe and Maya beaming from the front row. I didn't talk about betrayal. I talked about thread, how a single strand is weak, but woven together with intention and integrity, it can create something that holds fast for a lifetime. I talked about the strength found in perceived weakness and the perception that comes not from the eyes, but from the heart and the hands. Afterward, as we celebrated in a tiny patisserie, Mrs. Abe leaned in. I heard a little rumor from my niece. Chloe is working as a sales associate at a chain department store. She tried to get a job at a proper atelier, but it seems her reputation precedes her. I took a small bite of a perfect macaron. I felt no schadenfreude, only a distant, quiet pity. She had tried to build her castle on the quicksand of theft and lies, and it had swallowed her whole. I looked at Maya, who was excitedly sketching a dress inspired by the Parisian rooftops, and at Mrs. Abe, my steadfast friend. The fabric of my life had been torn, yes, but I had mended it myself with stronger thread and a finer stitch. And the resulting tapestry, with its complex patterns and rich history, was more beautiful than ever before. The return from Paris should have been the final, triumphant chord. My workroom was now a place of pilgrimage for serious design students Maya brought by, and orders were carefully curated, a waiting list stretching months. The Lifetime Achievement Award stood on my shelf, not as an endpoint, but a milestone. The quiet was rich and full. Then, the documentary crew called. A producer from a respected arts channel, having seen the coverage of the award, wanted to feature me in a series called Enduring Hands. They wanted to film my process, my history, the story of a craft passed down. My first instinct was to refuse. My life had been picked over enough. But Mrs. Abe saw the strategic needle. It's not just your story, Flo. It's the story of the work. It's armor. You put the truth on film, and it becomes the official record. No one can ever rewrite it again. So I agreed. The crew was respectful, their presence a low hum in the background of my days. They filmed my hands, gnarled and spotted with age, guiding silk through the machine with unerring confidence. They interviewed Mrs. Abe, who spoke of my 50-year loyalty to her store. They filmed Maya, the future, speaking with reverence about the Petrov line and the architecture of a sleeve. On the final day of filming, the director, a thoughtful woman named Lena, asked if she could see the famous Abernathy cascade gown. I brought it out, the silk sighing as it caught the light. As she filmed the exquisite, redrawn details, she asked an offhand question. This was one of the patterns your granddaughter tried to replicate, correct? The digital file was corrupted. Yes, I said, my guard up. But I redrew it. It's just fascinating, Lena mused, her cameraman zooming in on the intricate beading. The workmanship is so specific. The copies we saw in the legal filings were crude, but they had a few of the unique structural elements exactly right. It's odd she knew how to replicate the internal boning structure without the original master pattern. The comment was a single stray thread. But after a lifetime at the sewing table, you learn you must pull it. That night, I couldn't sleep. The director's observation needled me. Chloe was lazy. She knew how to cut corners, not how to engineer a complex internal structure. She had access to my digital files, yes, but the master patterns, the heavy cardstock templates with all my construction notes, the secrets of a Petrov original, were physical. They were locked in the flat file cabinet I'd bought after the lawsuit. A cold dread began to stitch itself together in my chest. The next morning, I went straight to the cabinet. The lock was intact. But as I lifted the heavy portfolio for the Abernathy cascade, the weight felt wrong. I laid it on the table, my heart hammering. I opened it. Inside was my cardstock. But the lines were fresh. Too dark. The notes in the margin were in a hand that mimicked mine, but wasn't. It was a brilliant, meticulous forgery. She hadn't just stolen the digital files. She had somehow gained access weeks, maybe months, before her betrayal and had photographed or traced my physical master patterns, creating perfect replicas before I ever knew I was at war. The sabotage of the digital file was a feint, a piece of misdirection to make me think that was the only copy she'd had, to stop me from looking deeper. She had the blueprints all along. The betrayal was older, colder, and more calculated than I had ever imagined. Mrs. Abe was at my side in minutes. Her face was grim as she examined the forgery. She had help, Flo. This level of work? This isn't Chloe. She doesn't have the patience or the skill. The truth felt like a bolt of ice water. Help. Who had a key? Who had unsupervised access? The answer was a second, more profound betrayal, one that threatened to unravel the new life I had so carefully woven. My eyes fell on the digital tablet Maya used, the one that synced seamlessly with all my new, secure cloud storage. The one she'd used to help me resecure my archive. The one she was so proficient with. She had arrived just after the worst of the storm. She had been the solution, sending me by the career office at the fashion school, an office I now realized I had never actually contacted. They had contacted me, citing a generous new grant for placing students with master artisans. A grant that, I would likely discover, had been funded by the settlement from Pop Style Boutique. A settlement that had bought my granddaughters spy a front-row seat to my resurrection. I looked at Mrs. Abe, the last true ally in a world of beautiful, treacherous facades. "It seems," I said, my voice eerily calm, "the game is not over." I didn't feel despair. I felt a cold, sharp focus, the same I get when facing a particularly complex bespoke piece. They thought the old woman was finally safe, her defenses lowered by a false peace. But they were wrong. You don't survive 60 years in this business without learning how to set a trap with your own thread. And this time, I wouldn't be mending. I would be tailoring a revenge so perfectly fitted to its recipients, they would walk into it themselves. "Call the documentary director, Eleanor," I said to Mrs. Abe, a new, steely note in my voice. "Tell her the story isn't finished. Tell her I'm ready to give them the ending."